Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man working as a climatologist gets a report of a place with weird weather. So, what's the forecast there? Because here, it is snowing feathers.
As a climatologist, I spend most of my days just screaming into the void. One academic paper at a time, I start to feel more and more like a doomsday prophet. The end is nigh, we yell from the proverbial rooftops. But honestly, I'm as sick of doing that as you are listening to it. Don't get me wrong, I love my job. I get to see and understand things that others usually take for granted. To see the machinations of the planet come together to explain an unpredictable outcome. To face the storm and say, yeah, I get it. We're learning the language of Mother Nature, her screams, tantrums, agony, and relief. But earlier this year, I was sent to study something new and different. I wouldn't go as far as to say we're bound to the whims of an eccentric millionaire, but at the same time, it wouldn't be too far from the truth. Most of our collective projects are privately funded. Most of the time, we're free to do whatever we please, as long as we make our parent company look good. But sometimes they point us in a direction and ask us to go fetch. We're basically academics on retainer, ready to drop our projects at a moment's notice to service our masters. Yeah, I don't like that metaphor either. One day an article dropped in my inbox. It was sensationalist nonsense. No more than 400 words about fishermen coming back from the sea covered in feathers. They called it feather snow, and they swore to its authenticity, claiming it usually came around every 2 weeks or so. The article played it off as a joke, but I wasn't laughing. I could see who sent it to us, our parent company. We had a short staff meeting, and it turned out everyone had been sent the same article. Someone was heading southeast of Portsmouth to debunk it. Well, it turns out that someone was me. I got set up at a small bed and breakfast. All cynicism aside, the people of New Hampshire are wonderful. They were welcoming and understanding, and without a hint of mean spirit. I felt so open about what I was doing there that I told anyone who asked, and I got very honest responses. Apparently, the feather snow was a known phenomenon that dated back to the 80s. It was more frequent nowadays, but there were articles way back speaking of the same thing. Fishermen who'd gotten caught in it weren't locals, and had called the papers. That resulted in the article we'd seen. The locals knew better. This type of thing happened every now and then. Once I got to talking with the local fishermen, it was made apparent that feather snow was a real thing. Very real. They planned around it, and they avoided it when they could. They'd pull up their nets early and reposition their boats to avoid it. 4 different families of fishermen showed me feathers from the previous falls that they'd saved in jars, and I was allowed to take some home for testing. It dawned on me that these were real people dealing with real consequences. This wasn't some sensationalist nonsense. I sent the feathers in for testing with some of my colleagues. The results were back within a couple of days. 4 different types of gulls, great black-backed, laughing Mew and Franklins, as well as a couple of Forster's tern. Pretty common New Hampshire seaside birds. These weren't some fake duck feathers saved up in a jar just for fun. These were actual, real feathers. Why would they just come falling out of the sky and so frequently? I managed to get a hold of a captain, willing to take me out to sea at the next feather snow. Captain Willard Morrow and his son Robert. They also had 2 fishermen who worked for them, but there was no need to bring them along just to witness the feather snow. Instead, the 3 of us were going alone. I brought all kinds of equipment. I was going to measure everything from cloud density to humidity to freaking radon. I just brought whatever I could. Before I left my room, I also brought along my lucky binoculars. Few things can be as valuable as seeing something up close with your own eyes. And these binoculars had been with me for a long time. Hell, they'd helped me spot the origin point of a tornado once. It was a Sunday afternoon when we pulled up the anchor and set out to sea. Not too far out, but far enough that the coastline started to look like a thread. I double-checked my equipment, and Willard was doing the same. His boat was tried and tested, but all electronics were no more than a couple of years old. Just as I was making sure I'd capture everything, he was making sure we were getting back to land. His son, Robert, spent most of his time texting and counting the minutes. Feathers now wasn't something new and exciting to these people. Around 6 p.m., we saw the first signs. Clouds were gathering, but they were spread thin and white. When it rains, clouds turn black. These were classic cirrus clouds, not something you associate with bad weather or storms. Strong winds, perhaps. I was triple-checking my equipment when Robert poked his head out of the cabin window. He pointed just off the side of the boat. See? There's one. He was right. There was a feather there. How hadn't I noticed it? Then I saw it. Millions of feathers falling in unison. A blanket spread out for miles, tumbling through the air just a couple of feet of distance between them. White feathers calmly touching the ocean. A few of them landed on me, and the boat got covered in them. Robert sighed. He was probably going to have to hose the deck off once we got back to land. There it is, said Willard. Like clockwork. Feathers now. What do you think? No idea, I said, shaking my head. How can it... Every 2 weeks? Yous believe us now? We're not just telling stories anymore? Catching a feather between my fingers, I just stared in disbelief. Of course, I'd thought they were lying. I'd thought it for days, but this was real. This was something you could hold in your hand. Willard just laughed. When I got back to my room, I started trying to make sense of the data. There'd been no increase in humidity. It was as if 1 second there was nothing, then there were feathers. Usually I could tell by the equipment readings when something happened, but there was no cutoff point. There was not a single point where I could say, look, this is where the feathers started to fall. There was nothing like that. They tumbled down, and that was it. Full stop. I talked to my boss about it, explaining that we basically had nothing to go on. He didn't care for it. Either I made something out of this or I didn't. I could debunk it or explain it. There was no middle ground. Now that I'd seen it and taken pictures, there was no question of it anymore. It was authentic, but odd. That was the best way to describe it. Odd. I spent a couple of days just making up a new plan. I spent my nights at the local pub watching football. Go Wildcats, I guess. And taking long walks. I didn't know how to proceed. There are no rule books for this type of thing. I met Willard and his two fishermen at the pub one night. They recommended I talk to a guy named Humphrey, or Hump, and they gave me a number. He was a pilot of a small plane used for displaying banners and messages, a skywriter of sorts. He was a retiree who ran a private pilot course for folks around the area, and he was a bit of a local celebrity. You should see what's going on in the clouds, Willard suggested, and if you're going up, you want Hump to pilot the damn thing. It wasn't a bad idea, and it earned them a couple of beers. Go Wildcats. I'm not afraid of heights, and I'm not afraid of flying, but this time, I was. I got in touch with Hump, and we decided to go up during the next feather snow. He didn't mind. The winds were usually mild, and he had a proposal to help out with anyway. As long as I promised to help him with the lettering, he would help me out, free of charge. How could I say no? He brought me out to this tiny airstrip on the outskirts of town. There was barely any asphalt on the road there, but the strip itself was immaculate. It was privately owned, and Hump took great care of it. As I got there, he was hosing off the plane. We shook hands, had a few laughs, and I helped him with the letters. "Marry me, Jocelyn," it said in bold red letters. When it was time to go, I had to cram myself into the back seat of the plane. There were only 2 seats, and I couldn't bring much equipment. I settled for my camera and my binoculars. Hump, being of a slightly larger than average frame, barely fit in the front seat. Still, he was as used to flying as I was to walking. I know I shouldn't have felt safe in that tiny seat, but there wasn't a hint of insecurity in anything he said. If anything, it was going to be fun. Good old Hump. Cirrus clouds usually rest at about 5,000 to 6,000 meters, and we were going well beyond 8,000. There would be plenty of opportunity for me to see what was going on for myself. Hump even agreed to stay lower than usual. He was, truth be told, a little questioning about why we were going out. Not because he was afraid, but because he didn't get the point. There was nothing out there. Sure, feather snow was weird, but it wasn't malicious. There wasn't a single shipwreck out there because of it. It was too close to shore. But we took to the skies. Man, feeling that big piece of metal lift from the earth is something I'll never get used to. It is one thing to be on a commercial flight, but this thing was tiny. Every twist and turn registered instantly in my stomach. When Hump started joking about a barrel roll, I nearly gagged. It wasn't the kind of thing you get used to. You either love it instantly or hate it for the rest of your life. I was clearly in the latter category. We circled around town a couple of times, 4 in total. Hump got a text message confirming they'd seen the proposal, and he turned the plane around. I just wanted it to be over. I got a hand cramp from steadying myself, and my ears were ringing from the sound of the propeller. Still, I'm a professional. I wanted to take some pictures and see what was going on. Once we started seeing the cirrus clouds, I got my camera out. It helped to watch the world through a lens. It made it seem less real. I took a few pictures, but wasn't seeing anything in particular. I leaned back to regain my composure when Hump spoke up. "Hey, you seen this?" he asked. "That's a lot of birds." I looked back down as Hump circled the area. He was right. It was a whole lot of birds. Hundreds, maybe thousands. More than there should be. They were circling a particularly thick part of the cloud cover. Hump took us down to get a better view, and I photographed at least a dozen different species, all flying in a circular formation like a ring in the sky. It would have been impossible to see them from the ground. They were hidden by the clouds. They were all of different white plumages, and they kept to a certain part of the sky where the clouds obscured them. "You seeing this?" he repeated. "What are they doing?" "Same as us," I laughed. "Either sightseeing or fishing." I brought out my binoculars to get a better look. Then I saw it. In the center of the bird ring, where the clouds were the thickest, there was a black spot. It hadn't been there a few seconds ago. A big circle-like shape. I photographed it, putting my camera on max zoom. What happened next will haunt me. A white circle appeared inside the black spot. As Hump took us up, I realized I was staring at an eye. An eye the length of 2 fishing boats. In the literal blink of an eye, thousands of birds just disappeared. Their bodies were gone, leaving only feathers behind. Feathers that slowly wafted down like snow. Then, the eye turned its attention to us. I could see a faint outline in the clouds, like a shimmering celestial flatfish, too large to comprehend. I started hyperventilating, burying my head between my knees, staring into myself instead of out the window. I pounded the back of Hump's seat, stammering to take us away. Nothing happened. I forced myself to look up, only to see the front seat empty. Nothing but the clothes remained of Hump as the plane started to turn, fast. What happened next were the most panicked seconds of my life. Trying to wrap my head around what I'd seen, trying to pull the flight stick up, trying to get loose and climb into the front seat, all while plummeting towards the open ocean. I sat on Hump's warm clothes as the ocean came rushing towards me. I don't know how I survived. The crash was devastating. I remember crawling out of a wreckage, being cut by hot metal, leaning against a life preserver. There was an intense cold, followed by a pleasant warmth. I threw up at least 3 times, and I passed out just as something shone a light in my face. I woke up 2 days later in a hospital. The crash was pretty big local news, but that's all it was. No mentions of eyes in the sky, no mentions of the feather snow. No, apparently Hump was a known alcoholic who did sightseeing flights without a license. My name was spared from the articles, but there were plenty of mentions of an implied rich snob who got his comeuppance. I haven't been back since, and my physical therapy is progressing slower than it should. It feels like that thing is still out there, looking for me. It has seen me, and now it wants to know where I went. It wants to do something with me. The entire me, not just my body. It wants to take me away, leaving nothing but a shell behind. My feathers, if you will. There have been no more reports of feathers now outside the coast southeast of Portsmouth. Apparently it stopped after Hump disappeared. But just last night, as I was struggling to sleep, I saw it. Clear as day, a single white feather dancing towards the ground. I think it's here.
Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bump in the night. On tonight's episode, a man with a string of bad luck. It's a job at a prison when a strange man seems to know him all too well. So, whatever you do, stay away from the blue-handed inmate.
A few years back, I had the worst streak of bad luck in my entire life. My dad, my one living parent, got run over at a pedestrian crossing. My fiance left me, I lost my job at the warehouse, and I had to move to the outskirts of town because of a sudden rent spike. My one stroke of good luck was my friend Garrett. He mainly worked the commissary at a nearby prison, and he told me they were looking for more people, mainly night crew, but the pay was solid. There was a trial period and 2 weeks of on-the-job learning, but it was all paid for. In my position, how could I say no? So I started my job as a corrections officer just outside of Tomskog, Minnesota. The place was partly owned by a private company, but it was basically the same logo you'd see all over town. Hatchet Pharma has a finger in everything around here. I got the uniform, I met the inmates. I went through the routine, and I got to know who to keep my eyes on. I had to fire my taser after 3 weeks on the job, but that was pretty much the highlight. Most of the time is just sitting around, waiting for something to happen or breaking up loud conversations. It's not as dramatic as it sounds, but you gotta be ready for when it counts. In December of 2021, I was assigned to a new route. One of the people working with inmates in solitary confinement had to quit over a health scare, and I was next in line to take his place. It was still a night gig, but in a deeply disturbing part of the jail. Now, I won't paint it to be something it's not. Isolation is just a whole bunch of people keeping to themselves. Usually, not even that many. Sure, the Tomskog facility has a slightly higher solitary capacity than normal, but we're talking 10 to 20% at most. Still, you need someone there at all times. You never know what they can come up with, and they're trickier than they look. There was this one guy at the end of the hall who just gave me the creeps. The other guards called him Mary, short for a longer biblical name I could never remember. He always broke the lights in his cell, and he was rumored to be extremely violent. Even in solitary confinement, he had to wear shackles. Every time he received his food, he had to put his hands out, have the shackles removed so he could eat. That's basically the only part of him I ever saw, his hands. The cell was always pitch black. The guy used to be an academic. Mary had 3 doctorates, but one day he just snapped. Killed 3 of his students. He also had some kind of chemical burn on his arms, leaving most of the skin on his hands discolored. Silver poisoning, possibly. Even his files were strange, stamped with a sort of blue flower. Most inmates had a stamp on their file, but he was the only one with a sunflower. The guy refused to eat during the day, so I was the one to feed him on the night shift. Every time I removed those shackles, I'd see those gnarled blue hands reach for me, or the tray, whichever. One of those nights, we were having beef stew. Nothing fancy to look at, but the thing smelled divine. I brought him some bread on the side, a little Jell-O box, and a bottle of water. Everyone else was fast asleep, apart from a newbie who couldn't stop crying at the end of the corridor. Same procedure as last time, I said, hands up front. Those elongated fingers slowly slid out, as if giving me an invisible fruit. The shackles clattered. I put down the tray, got the keys, and started twisting the locks back and forth. These were always a pain to deal with.
You're going to let me out.
Mary said, "Oh,
I need you to, so you're going to."
yeah, I don't see that happening, buddy." I unlocked his shackles and fetched his tray. He took it, but lingered for a second.
You're going to.
He said with no hint of a joke.
It's already decided.
Well, no one showed me that memo, I chuckled. You good in there?
Someone said bad things happened to you,
Mary said.
and that's why you're here.
Well, that makes 2 of us. Have a nice dinner. I walked away, but couldn't help but to look back as those long fingers slid back inside the dark room. Gave me the creeps every time. And sure, I had to get the tray and cuff him back up in a bit, but that was just part of the job. The next night was fish sticks. Not too shabby, but far from fresh. There were only 3 people in solitary that night. 2 guys who tried to kill each other, and Mary. Always Mary. As soon as I approached, those blue hands slid back out. I had to look away. There was something about the texture of his hands that made me feel weird. Like they were always a bit too slick. Like a thin cover of soap. This time, he didn't skip a beat.
You're going to let me out.
He said,
It's already decided.
"You keep saying it, but this door seems just as sturdy today as it did yesterday."
If you come in, you'll see why you're going to let me out.
You mean if I open this door without any kind of backup or supervision? Yeah, I got a pretty good idea why you'd get out if I did.
That's not it.
I unlocked his shackles and he took his tray. It disappeared into the darkness, but Mary kept talking.
You being here is proof that I made it.
He said,
That I'll get out.
"I'm not following."
They told me you lost a lot of things. Your dad, your girl, your apartment.
There was poison in his words. Deep, seething poison. I'll be honest, I wanted to break his goddamn hands when he said it. But what bothered me more was where he'd heard it from. There was no one around to talk to him. And as a rule, we didn't talk to inmates about our personal lives. Neither our own, nor that of other employees. Someone must have slipped up. "Look, that's personal," I said to him. "That's none of your business."
Then how do I know your dad got hit by a white Corolla?
I banged on the door. I didn't even know why. It was just this instinctual reaction to shut him up. But of course, that just made him laugh. How the hell did he know? It had been a hit and run, and the color of the car was only a footnote in the police report. "That's not funny," I spat. "And you're not making any new friends by being an asshole."
I don't care, little man.
He continued,
Because you're going to let Mr. out.
"Not on my goddamn life." I took the tray back from him before he finished his dinner, and I shackled him right back up. He didn't resist. It shut him up for a while, but it was a faint victory. I asked to be transferred to another shift, but there just wasn't any other people available. Hiring was rough. We were basically on our own. If we lost one person to sickness, we'd be shit out of luck at that point. So no, there was no option to switch. It couldn't be done. I didn't want to go back to Mary. I really didn't. I didn't know who was talking to him, and I didn't like what he was saying. I'd checked and double-checked, and there was no mistaking that white Corolla. It had gone 60 on a 30 Empire Street and killed him on impact before disappearing down a dirt road. The thing was just gone. Police said it might have been deliberate, that it was too fast to be an accident. And in my mind's eye, I could see blue hands on the steering wheel. When I walked up to Mary's cell with a tray of meatballs and mashed potatoes, I was genuinely scared of what he might say. Every word felt like a threat. Could he really say something to make me let him out? What if he could? What would it be? "Hands out," I said, knocking on his door.
You're not letting me out tonight.
He sighed.
I know that, but it's gonna happen.
Yeah, I shrugged. That's all I want to do.
Did they tell you what I did? How I did it?
I got a pretty good picture.
Helium poisoning. Painless asphyxiation. They didn't feel a thing.
I didn't respond. I just took off his shackles and gave him the tray.
I'm not a monster, you know.
He added,
I just do what I have to do.
"Eat up and leave the tray," I said as I walked off.
Maybe ask your ex about Beverly.
He shouted through the slit in the door. I could almost see his lips moving.
I'm sure you'll find it an illuminating conversation.
I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to talk about it, and I didn't want to think about it. But goddammit, there was something there. In the last fight we'd had, she'd shouted at me. Beverly. I didn't know of Beverly, and at that moment, I didn't care. But it was such a specific name. The chance that Mary just picked it up on random was improbable. So the next day, before my shift, I decided to give my ex a call. Things had calmed down, after all. There was a cold greeting and even colder small talk. Finally, she just called me out.
Just tell me what you want.
She asked. I want to talk about Beverly, I said. You said her name once.
What, you're getting remarried? Want to bury the hatchet?
No, what?
You want me to forgive you? Give you my blessing?
What are you talking about? There was a moment of silence. She scoffed.
The skank you're dating.
I'm not dating a Beverly, I said. You never have.
Don't give me that shit. I saw your emails, her videos, her Insta.
Look, I don't know any Beverly. She screamed her username and cut the call. I got online and looked her up. Beverly was maybe 8 years younger than me and absolutely stunning. She'd only been active for a few months, where she'd upload a sort of daily video vlog. It was heartbreaking. In every post, she talked about the issues of being the other woman. A vlog kind of thing. Daily outfit posts, memes, a sort of strange mix. This is the woman she thought I'd been involved with? Through some kind of email? It didn't make sense. And how the hell did Mary know about this? This haunted me. I didn't know what to think, and I felt myself coming back to Mary in his blue hands. I had this constant sense of him being with me, looking at me. It felt like I was missing something. I could feel that strange, slick texture as the hands wrapped around my neck whenever I let my mind wander. I could feel his presence in the backseat of my car, riding along with me. And once at a stop sign, I heard him clear as day, right behind me.
You're gonna let me out!
But there was no one there. The next time I went back, I skipped the tray. We were gonna figure this out. I finished my coffee and thundered down the hall, ignoring the other inmates. Mary had some explaining to do, and I was goddamn terrified of what he was gonna say. But I needed to hear it. You're gonna tell me what you know right now, I said. I've had my black coffee, and I'll break your goddamn hands.
You let me out, and it'll all be clear.
Chuckled Mary.
I promise. It's kind of written on the wall at this point.
I smacked my nightstick against the door. No more fucking games.
Then come in. Teach me a lesson. Open the door.
I calmed down. Maybe this was how he got to me, tricking me. That wasn't gonna work, no way.
Your shift starts at 10:15,
Mary said.
You take your coffee black, and you came here the first thing you did. Hold on.
He shuffled off into the back of the cell. There was a strange scratching sound, and he was gone for a solid minute. I just listened, trying to figure him out. I shone a flashlight inside, but he'd hung up a sheet over the slit in the door. I couldn't see anything without going inside.
So, there was your dad. You reacted to that. Then a Beverly. That worked. What made you lose your last job? Was it, let's say a failed drug test? Yeah, that'll work.
What the hell are you talking about?
And you don't do drugs. Probably some kind of error. Maybe a few. Poppy seed pastries for breakfast. Those things can give a false positive.
I just stood there, mouth wide open. The morning of the mandatory drug test, I'd had 3 pastries with poppy seeds. The bakery down the street were giving them away as a promotional event. I got this awful pit in my stomach. Like he knew more about me than I did. Like he was about to tell me something horrible. Like he was standing right behind me, just soaking up my fear.
So that brought you here. I'll have to figure that out later. Maybe you know someone here.
He continued. Shut up, I said through the door. I'm telling you to shut up. I looked over my shoulder. There was no one else here. Why was I feeling watched?
Calm down,
Mary said.
We're getting to the end. You're about to let me out.
Never, I spat. You're gonna fucking rot in there.
Don't you understand?
He yelled back.
The fact that you're here proves that I'm right.
How? That doesn't make any goddamn sense. And he told me everything. Mary, or Meridian, was given an opportunity. If he followed a very specific set of events, he would be given a great gift.
Non-locality,
He said.
but you need to dissociate hard enough. Basically turn yourself crazy enough for reality not to make sense anymore. Or rather, for you as a person not to make sense to reality. The other way around.
As a part of this delusion, he killed 3 of his students. He burned himself with chemicals. Then, seemingly as part of his plan, he willingly went to jail.
Years of darkness.
He added.
Isolation. Like being in a sensory deprivation tank. I need it. I crave it. Then I'm done.
And all for what?
To be unbound. No causality, no rules, non-linearity. And the fact that you're standing here is all the proof that I need to know that it is going to work.
And why is that?
Don't you get it?
A blue hand slipped out of the slit in the door and pointed at me.
I did this to you. I put you here. Someday, you will let me out, because if you didn't, I wouldn't get you to come here, and that time is drawing close. I don't need this darkness anymore. I feel it. I'm done.
That's impossible, I said, and that's literally impossible.
Then why are you sliding down the wall? Feeling sleepy?
I hadn't even noticed. I was nodding off, right there in the hall. I tried touching my face to see if I could feel anything.
Did you? Yes.
Mary said,
I drugged you. I couldn't have if you hadn't told me about the black coffee, but now that you did, I could. It's on the list. It's all on the list, and what's on the list is going to happen.
I don't understand.
Imagine you could travel through time.
I chuckled.
Not today, but someday. And you promise yourself that you're gonna put a rose outside your door on this very day, in this very present. And when you open your door, the rose is there, then you would know that you're gonna get that power. You know you will come here someday. Then it all comes down to strength of will, to force yourself to remember all that you're going to do, and in the correct order.
That's not... An image flashed in my head. Blue hands on the steering wheel of a white Corolla. A man paying the bakery to promote some pastries. A woman being paid for a bit of internet theater by an unknown benefactor. There were dozens of people standing at the end of the hallway. Thin, emaciated men with long fingers and blue hands. I blacked out. I woke up in the staff room with a nurse looking into my eyes. They gave me a checkup and sent me home to rest up. They gave me a few days off just to make sure. I didn't know what to say. I had my keys, and Mary was still in his cell. If I was the one to let him out, all I had to do to make sure that didn't happen was to stay away. That'd ruin his plans. So, taking a few days off seemed perfectly fine. As I was about to leave, Gareth met me in the parking lot. He jogged out to say goodnight and see if I was okay.
Look,
He said,
I know you hate that shift, but don't worry about it. They're moving him, and I've heard talks of approving a shift change. He'll be someone else's problem, and you'll be back in cell block D.
What do you mean?
They heard how much he was messing with you,
Gareth said.
and decided it just wasn't worth it. They're moving him. We can't lose you.
What? Why?
Gee, I thought this was good news.
No, I don't know. I don't know. Gareth patted my shoulder and sent me on my way. I didn't know what to say. How could I explain it? Did I even believe it? I got in my car and took a deep breath. A strange chemical smell. I noticed something on the passenger seat. A letter. I took a deep breath and opened it.
Thanks for the help.
It said,
This one's on me.
a little smiley face and a $100 bill. I just stared at it. Suddenly, there was a loud bang. For a heartbeat, all I could see were blue hands, simultaneously smacking my car. I shot out of the driver's seat, but there was no one outside, just an empty parking lot. Still, I couldn't help but feel watched. My pulse pounded behind my eyes, almost popping a blood vessel. They were out there. He was out there, watching me from the dark. He was still getting out. I knew he was all around me, unbound. He could stab me, push me over, whatever. He'd be there and then not, and I'd be helpless. I got this intense sense of paranoia washing over me, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I just dug my fingers into my hair, trying to force my mind out of that dark pit. This was my doing. I'd let him treat me like shit, and because of it, they were going to move him. During that move, he'd get out. He must have planned it, and I couldn't do shit about it since I was off duty. I took another look at that $100 bill, and the thought occurred to me. There was something I could do. I went to the gas station. I came back the next day with a backpack. I showed my credentials and told the gatekeep that I was there to fetch something from my locker. It was fine. Danny knows me. I got in on the day shift and waved at the others. A few of them asked how I was doing, what I was doing, the regular chit-chat. All smiles and waves. Prison transfers takes place in the early afternoon. It'll only be a short walk, but that might be all he needed to escape. I used my keys to get past cell block D. I knew I'd get stuck on camera, but I also knew that the prisoners were out in the yard. No one was watching the tapes. Not this close to lunch. I walked straight into the solitary ward and all the way up to Mary's door.
Wait,
He said,
you're here?
"Yeah,
No, that doesn't make any sense.
send me home then. Have someone shoot me. I'm waiting."
No, wait, that doesn't... Hold on!
There was a shuffle as Mary hurried into the back of his cell. I couldn't feel them here. We were alone. I unzipped my backpack and took out a door stopper. I shoved it under the door. That thing wasn't moving anytime soon. I stepped over to the fire alarm and pulled the handle. The emergency doors opened with a violent blaring siren. Every door swung open, but Mary's. I was lucky that time. No one in the solitary ward but Mary and I.
Hold on. What are you doing?
I took out one more thing from my backpack, a can of gasoline. I shoved it through the slit in the door, tearing down the sheet he'd hung up.
Oh, you're killing me. That's what this is?
Yeah. And I see no little blue hands trying to stop me. So I guess it's working.
Maybe you're missing the point. Maybe you're not doing what you're supposed to.
And how exactly is that a bad thing if it keeps you from getting out? Half a can was enough. It was leaking under the door. I took out a gasoline-soaked rag, lit it on fire, and tossed it through the slit. For a split second, the room lit up. The walls, the bed, even Mary. I got a short view of the room as it was, and what he was doing in there. He had drawn things on the walls and the floor. White Corolla, Beverly, poppy seeds, black coffee. The wall was full of things. Arrows, lines, and squares. All related to me. These were all things he was going to do when he got out. And he was so convinced that I was the one to let him out. So convinced that it had all started to happen. And then there was Mary himself. He was more bone than man. Sunken eyes like he hadn't slept for weeks. He'd torn his hair out and bit off his fingernails. This was a completely senseless man, and he stared at me with unblinking eyes. But in that moment, as the flames started to lick him and the fire spread into the hallway, he looked me in the eyes and smiled. I just bolted out of there. Hundreds of inmates were gathering in the yard, and I could already hear sirens. I could see flames bursting out of the solitary ward. Before the firefighters could get there, one of the walls completely collapsed, and I saw him. Just for a brief second, I saw that emaciated man standing in the flames, holding his hands out like he was receiving a gift. The chemicals in his arms ignited with a bright green. They'd burned straight through the wall, and the thought hit me. Technically, he was out. He might be on fire, but he was out. And in that split second, in that heartbeat, he vanished, like snuffing out a candle. Hours later, the fire was put out. It didn't spread. Turns out that part of the jail had a peculiar type of stone that was weak to high temperatures. The stonework just crumbled. Some kind of exposure to a certain chemical. A blue one with a green flame. The construction crew had cheaped out on materials many years ago. There were no recordings. They'd forgotten to change the tapes from last night. There were no visitors' logs. Barely anyone remembered me even being there. And lastly, there was no body recovered in that cell. As I got back in my car, I just held my breath, waiting for something to happen. A knife at my throat. Possibilities passed through my mind. In another place, it all really happened. Violent images of myself getting stabbed, burned, tortured, and flayed. A world where everyone turned to ash, and I was placed in front of a throne of bone as a prize jester. Dark figures rising from the earth, tearing the world apart, breaking the ground like an eggshell. I cried. It was seconds away, at most. But minutes passed. I found a letter on the passenger seat. It hadn't been there seconds a cog. It took me a solid 15 minutes to work up the courage to open it.
You got me out.
It said with a smiley face. And there was another $100 bill.